Hi, I'm Dr. Peter Osborne, founder of Gluten-Free Society, and I'm here in the manufacturing plant where all my products are made. I wanted to give you a behind-the-scenes tour to show you how we make my products so you can be as confident as I am that they are safe, powerful, and effective. In step one, when a raw material ingredient arrives at the facility, we first need to make sure it really is what our supplier says it is. For instance, if we ordered magnesium, we test to verify that that's what they shipped. Then we further test to ensure it has zero issues with harmful bacteria or heavy metal levels. Why do we do this? I want proof from the start that you're getting clean, safe ingredients. This step exceeds industry standards, but I wouldn't have it any other way. Then comes step two. Once all the raw materials pass this first step of quality control, they're weighed individually so the right ingredients and the right amounts end up in your supplements. They're blended in specialized machinery to make sure you get the same product each and every time. During step three, the product is packaged and goes to the lab for its final round of testing. In this stage, we confirm that what's on the label is in the product and retest to ensure nothing unexpected has snuck in. Testing before, during, and after might seem redundant to you, but we want to be absolutely certain you can trust these products. By the way, if you get your supplements somewhere else, there's a chance they may not have been tested at all. I use these products in my clinic, I use them myself, I use them with my friends and family and loved ones, and most importantly, I share them with you, knowing you'll see powerful results in your own health. And as always, we want to make sure you have access to high-quality, gluten-free products so that when you're looking for supplements to take, you don't have to worry about cross-contamination issues that could make you sick. Hey everybody, welcome to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. We've got a great Q&A for you today. If you're new to the show, very simple. Type your questions in. If they're nutritionally oriented, health oriented, I'll do my best to get them answered in the next hour. Number two, if you missed Tuesday's show, we do a live show every Tuesday with a crash course on a variety of different topics. This week we did a show specifically on serine, the amino acid that boosts the brain and helps to reduce cognitive decline, improve sleep, and so many other great characteristics. You should go back and always check out that show. If you've got serine related questions, I'll answer those for sure today. And then beyond that, we'll take your general questions. So let's dive in. Jessica says, I use a homeopathic tincture with organic cane alcohol at a 20% as part of that product. Is this cane sugar? Well, it's derived from cane sugar, Jessica. It's not technically still sugar, although if you reacted to sugar on a sensitivity test, I would proceed with great caution. It probably would be a product I would encourage you not to use because of that reaction. But yes, organic cane alcohol generally is derived from an organic sugar cane, and so hence my recommendation. Is there a big difference between L-serine and phosphatidylserine, and which is the best to get? So there are, from my experience clinically, there are differences, but the biggest difference is if you're really aiming to get the serine to your brain, if you're struggling with cognitive issues, memory problems, if you're struggling with sleep or heightened anxiety, the phosphatidylserine would definitely be a better option. That one will get to the brain and it will generally work more effectively in that regard. So that's one of the major differences. The other difference is that it's if we're talking about L-serine as a general rule of thumb, where we'll use that one when people have more musculoskeletal complaints or kind of cardiovascular risk factors like elevations of homocysteine or blood pressure, and it works fantastically well. So Those are probably two of the biggest clinical differences that I would encourage you to look at, depending on what you're trying to take it for or to use it for. And right now, if you go to Gluten-Free Society, those of you who appreciate the show and just want to support our product line, we have Serine on sale, both L-Serine and Phosphatidylserine. It's called Ultra Serine. And those, if you use the promo code, we got it in the box there, but it's Serine 15, and you'll save 15% on that particular products, or either one of those products. Let's see here. Watched your omega-3 crash course, and you talked about how omega-3s can lower LDL. The question is, can omega-3s lower LDL too much? No, because they're not working in a pharmacological way to suppress LDL. They're just helping your liver and your blood clear LDL effectively, but they're not going to push you down into that sub LDL range where you need to worry about muscle aches, muscle pains, hormone atrophy, or other problems like suicidal ideation or depression. So very, very safe. Fish oil, very, very safe to take, and it will not lower your LDL too much. Where a lot of people are with their LDL, when you talk about high versus low, one, I have a whole course on cholesterol that you should probably watch too, because I'm not a big fan of demonizing LDL. It's too important of a molecule, and I think it's oftentimes attributed more credit for heart disease than what it actually deserves. That being said, a lot of people have very low omega-3 diets, and so they're eating high omega-6, low omega-3. It disrupts the way their liver handles and packages cholesterol and fats, and so this is where taking or eating omega-3 is going to help the liver process better, and it has that lowering effect. So anyway, I hope that gives you some degree of clarity. Laura's asking, can your office help me balance the oral microbiome from harmful bacteria? I need help, and a lot of holistic dentists don't really know how to. I mean, yes, call and schedule. You can schedule a consult with Dr. Driscoll or myself. But yeah, I mean, we measure and analyze microbiomes, and really help guide people on a better path in that regard all the time. In the past, I was told to avoid phosphatidylserine because it can lower cortisol, and I have subclinical Addisons. That's probably decent advice, but what does it mean to have subclinical Addisons? Have you been confirmed Addisons? So when you say subclinical, I need better clarity or objectively around what that meant, what your doctor meant by that. And I would also need better clarity, like to give you a direct answer that's accurate, is what are your cortisol levels look like? I mean, just, did somebody tell you maybe you're kind of on the margin of Addison's but not really verify that or measure that or objectify that? So it's hard to answer that question specifically because I don't know how much I can have confidence in what you were told. Can too much mental stress cause joint deterioration to the point where I'm now scheduled for hip replacement? Yeah, I mean, stress is a killer, and stress can affect the body and impact it in many ways. But one of the major ways that stress can affect your joints, chronic stress, is through the elevation of cortisol. Cortisol elevations lead to joint degradation, muscle deterioration, bone degradation, elevations in blood sugar, elevations in blood pressure, reduced microcirculation. This would really apply in the hip, because if you've got reduced microcirculation of blood flow to the femur, that can contribute to a chronic inflammatory arthritis development over time. All that being said, what can you do? Have you dealt with the chronic stress? I mean, ultimately, if you're under a tremendous amount of stress, you've got to analyze that and look at why. There's three kinds of stress. There's physical, emotional, and chemical stress. For many people, it's job or relationships. For some people, it's health. They're stressed out about their own health because they're sick, and they're not stressed or they're not sick because they're stressed, but they're stressed because they're sick. And when you're sick for a long time, the stress can feed forward in the sickness. So the stress then becomes a driver of illness, but again, not necessarily the origin or the root cause of it. So there's a lot to unpack around stress. I believe we have a good show on that, Dawn, that you might want to check out as well. Let's see here. Can PBC with overlap autoimmune hepatitis can be cured. Okay, so you're talking about, can primary biliary cirrhosis overlap with autoimmune hepatitis? Yeah, of course. And can those be dealt with naturally? Yeah, absolutely. As a matter of fact, Jamil, if you're on our YouTube channel right now, if you go to one of our playlists, it's a testimonial playlist, and there's a story in there. Her name is Jennifer. So if you scroll through that testimonial story list, you'll see one of the stories is a woman named Jennifer, and that was her exact problem. And watch her story, get some hope from that story. But she was actually a client of mine years ago, and came to me very, very skeptical with autoimmune hepatitis, among other problems. And anyway, she's now in remission as far as that goes. So to answer your question, yes, but you've got to figure out what's driving it. Autoimmune disease has triggers. Food chemicals, microbes, nutritional deficiencies are the primary triggers for autoimmune disease. And those things can be measured objectively. So I strongly encourage you, you reach out to our office or get with somebody who does that kind of testing and analysis if you really want a solid answer. What are your ingredients in your Detoxy powder? I don't see an ingredient list. It's because there aren't any added fillers or excipients. Our vitamin C powder is made from an organic African sweet potato, and we mineralize it with just pure minerals, zinc and copper, magnesium, etc. So there's no fillers, there's no other ingredients. So what you see, that's one of the things about our labels, Christine, or I don't know who asked that, Jessica, I think it was Jessica that asked that question. We don't play around when it comes to supplement labeling. There's no hidden clues, or there's no like rabbit trails that you have to go down with. What's in our product is exactly there on the label, and so you don't have to worry about that. That's something I'm very adamant about and passionate about, because there's so much garbage in products today that the old rule, first do no harm. If you're taking a product to help yourself, but there's 5 ingredients that aren't good for you, that are hurting you, then you're helping, but maybe you're also hurting, and that's not good. I'm curious about the effect of seawater, which contains many minerals, on the skin. When I swim a lot in the sea and don't rinse the salt off my skin, I feel great physically. My skin is tight and shiny, and wonder if this is because of the minerals and more because of the body's thermoregulation. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to seawater, but definitely one of the primary benefits is mineral. Your skin is an organ that absorbs. There's no doubt about that. There's the studies on absorption of things through the skin, unfortunately, in the realm of nutrition, is somewhat limited, but we use drugs, deliver drugs through patches on the skin. I mean, it's a common type of prescription. So if you're swimming in the ocean, it's very likely you're absorbing a lot of the qualities of the minerals, and that's benefiting the hydration of your cells, especially in your skin, which would give you some of those benefits that you're talking about. But I wish we had more research on absorption through the skin directly as it relates to nutrition, but nobody's funding that. I talked about this Tuesday. The funding of nutritional research is largely lacking because, unfortunately, your tax dollars, if you live in the US, your tax dollars, they are subsidizing pharmaceutical research over nutritional research. There's a huge disparity between how much money from the federal government, federal government uses our money, right? So it's how much of our money is funding the research from pharmacy, so that then they can sell us back the drugs that we paid to research at a profit, at a tremendous profit, in many cases at a detriment. So the disparity is there. I wish that would change. Maybe it will with the new MAHA movement, but I'm not going to hold my breath. It's a pretty powerful lobby. In the past, okay, so I answered that one. If I have 2 infected root canals removed and 4 cavitation sites cleaned, which have extremely harmful bacteria in there, do I have to take antibiotics after? I mean, I don't know, Laura. That would part of that. I don't know enough about you and your history for me to be able to really directly comment without kind of reviewing that. 2, I would. That's a question too for your dentist. If you've got a dentist with that relationship, I mean, a lot of environmental dentists or biological dentists will not use an antibiotic in that situation. They will use things like peroxide and ozonated oxygen to clean those cavitations. And so you may not need an antibiotic. A lot of traditional dentists use antibiotics kind of like candy. They just pass them out indiscriminately, just in case, right? We've talked about the just in case, the antibiotic prescription, take it just in case. I'm not a fan of that. I think antibiotics are a powerful drug and have an intent. And if you don't have the problem that intent is designed for, then you can actually do more harm than good. Any experience with microclots? Yes. Conventional medicines only work on normal clots. So, bromelain, serapeptase, nattokinase, omega-3, magnesium, all important in proper blood viscosity. Now, that being said, those are all things that can be helpful. But the question will be, why are you microclotting? And I know what a lot of the commentary is going to be below. When you say clot, most people go to the last 4 years and what's been happening. But and that that we now know that. I mean, we knew it before, but now it's been actually published by even by the people that were censoring it before. So it's no longer a dismissed claim. But anyway. You got to figure out what's driving the microclotting. If you understand that part, because generally microclotting is caused by some hidden aspect of inflammation. So what drives inflammation has got to be the question that gets asked. If you did go and get that that needle in your arm, then that's potential. And there are things that can be done with that. But then you also have to look at food and other chemical triggers. You've got to look at microbial triggers as well. And you've got to look at nutrition. Vitamins and minerals regulate blood viscosity and regulate the normal clotting cascade and how blood morphology works. So if you're malnourished or have any of those other triggers, it could be that simple. How to trigger the release of adipose? So you don't want to take a GLP-1. I mean, if you want to trigger the release of adipose, the simplest thing in the world to do is go get a gym membership and start exercising consistently. And it maybe sounds oversimplistic because a lot of people are looking for the next great or next new thing. Not that you are. I'm not trying to pick on you, but exercise is such an underrated tool as it relates to weight management. And there's 6 things you have to do if you want to activate adipose and you want to lose weight. What are they? You've got to eat real food. And when I mean eat real food, I don't mean go to a nice restaurant. Nice restaurants are full of garbage and full of chemicals and full of pesticides and other endocrine disruptors that are going to stop your fat loss. Number 2, that means cooking at home. And a lot of people, that's where they get stuck. They're just like, I just can't cook at home. I don't have time. It's too much. I don't want to learn how to cook. I mean, I don't know where you fall in that, but that's just the harsh truth. You've got to learn how to cook at home if you want to eat healthy, because you can't eat healthy if you're going out all the time. So eat right, number 1. Number 2, exercise. And exercise varies based on your physical fitness level. But start where you're at. Start with where you can tolerate. And go back and watch my class. I did a whole class on muscle-less medicine. And we went in a deeper dive and strategies around that. So that's number 2 is exercise. Number 3 is go to bed on time. Get good sleep. Sleep regulates weight loss as well. Number 4, go outside and get sunshine. Sunshine increases ATP production by your cells, which is going to generate more energy as a whole. And that increased energy generation equates to caloric burn. And if you're trying to lose weight, you need caloric burn. Your body will mobilize fat tissue and use that fat through beta oxidation to make energy. And, you get 9 calories per gram in that way. So it's a much more energy rich process, but you have to activate it. So sunshine is one way we can do that. And then you've got to have clean air and clean water, because if you don't, you're being exposed to a lot of toxins. Those things can drive up inflammation, which drives up cortisol. Cortisol drives up blood sugar. Cortisol causes muscular atrophy, slows down your basic metabolic rate, and helps you retain fat around your organs and around your midsection, that central adiposity. So controlling the inflammation becomes very, very important outside of just calories in and calories out. But I'm not looking for, there's not a supplement, there's not a drug that's going to make you lose weight more effectively than those things. Now, if you want to add something naturally to those habits, what are some things that a person could add? For that, one would be berberine. If you want to use an herbal, berberine has pretty good effects. But outside of that, B vitamins will help mobilize your energy stores. If you have B vitamin deficiency, sometimes that can be a kind of a roadblock to weight loss. But it's my experience clinically that people that want to lose weight don't need drugs, don't need GLP-1s, don't need appetite suppressants, don't need a lot of the stimulants that are commonly associated with like 1 to 2 pounds of weight loss over their use. That stuff, most of it's bad for your adrenal glands, and it's not going to do you any favors, and it's just going to lead you down the rabbit hole of artificial temporary success. The key here is consistency of action over time. I mean, that's what health is. It's why not everyone's healthy. Not everyone's willing to have consistent behavior. They're not willing to sacrifice, the eating out or the social, the social times with the junk food. They're not willing to give up their morning Starbucks with the Choco Mocha latte, all that other nonsense, artificial sweeteners, etc. And so they pay the price. I mean, but everybody gets a choice. I mean, this is not my judgment. It's just the way that the world works. You get an option to choose the way you want, and the outcome will speak for itself. And if you're struggling with weight loss, it is the outcome of your choices, not the absence of a medication or a supplement. So always remember that. Can I take L-serine as well as phosphatidylserine? Yes, you can take them together. The question really there would be, do you need to take them together? But yes, you can. My son was recently diagnosed with high-functioning autism. Can I start him on the Autism Essential Bundle? We have changed diet to gluten and sugar-free. Rock on. That's great that you changed his diet. It's such an important first step. But yes, the Autism Bundle is very safe. There's nothing there that it's really going to be problematic. But what I would suggest, Liz, is with any new supplement protocol, start him on the lower amounts and work his way up. And you can reach out to our staff and they can give you general recommendation. They can't give you medical advice, but they can give you general recommendation as far as quantities based on how big or small he is, etc. Because depending if he's a kid versus a teenager and an adult, that autism bundle, the dosing may be a little bit different depending on his size. Can gallbladder disease cause high ALT, AST, and ferritin? Yes, it can. Has emergency, or what does that say? I think it's a typo. Can emergency gallbladder removal, or had emergency gallbladder removal? I'm not sure what you mean there, Diane. Do I have to take bile acids? So, okay, I think I know what you mean. You're asking, can the gallbladder disease cause elevations in liver enzymes and ferritin? The answer to that is yes. Can emergency gallbladder, or if you've had an emergency gallbladder removal, do you have to take bile acids? The answer is no, you don't have to. But the answer is, should you? Or really the question there is, should you? And in my opinion, yes, you should. If you don't have a gallbladder, you should take, we have a product called Lipogest before your meals. It's going to help put bile in your GI tract as you're eating, especially a higher fat meal. Remember, the purpose of bile is to help you absorb and digest fat. And, fat is omega-3. It's vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, vitamin K. So very important elements to needing bile to assimilate fat-soluble nutrients. And so if you don't have a gallbladder, and it's true of anyone without a gallbladder, my recommendation is generally you need to be taking a bile acid, prior to your meals, especially if they're higher fat meals. It'd be very supportive for you. 5 months now, gluten-free. Serum tests reveal low prealbumin. How can I best increase my body's ability to utilize protein through foods and supplements? It's not how can you, so if you're trying to increase your body's ability to utilize protein, if you're absorbing it okay, there's a lot to unpack there depending on your meaning. If you're talking about utilizing protein, so it's really would be utilizing amino acids, right? Because when you eat food, you break that food down into the protein down into the smaller amino acids. Those get absorbed into your bloodstream, and then those amino acids are then assembled in different orders depending on what your body's needs are. But much of how amino acids are used by the body internally depend on vitamin B6 and magnesium and vitamin B1. A lot of the B vitamins play a role in the utilization of amino acids. So you want to make sure your vitamins and mineral status are clean and up to speed to maximize your amino acid assembly. And if you have those deficiencies, then you can take plenty, but they may not be as effective for you. I don't know if that's what you meant, but the question, I mean, the other thing is you have low prealbumin. If you're talking about in your blood, you may just not be eating enough protein. Like it could be an absorption problem where you're not absorbing it well enough. It could be that you're eating enough, but not absorbing it. It could be that you're not eating enough and therefore not getting enough. And then it could be that you're getting enough, eating enough, absorbing enough, but you lack nutrients to process it internally. But those are all potential possibilities that if you're not sure about, you should ask your doctor to help you explore if they understand it. Nutrition is the lost art in medicine. It really is. I've been practicing 24 years and it never amazes me, especially when I go to conferences or I go and hold conferences and do teaching to other doctors. It never amazes me just how little a lot of them know. It's quite surprising and alarming because to me, this is all primary medicine. It's fundamental. Everybody should know this stuff if you're going to be in healthcare. Like this is where you start. You don't start with a prescription pad. You start with what's on the plate. How are you sleeping? How are you exercising? Are you getting sunshine? Are you in a clean air quality home or are you not? And what kind of environmental toxins are you being exposed to? Like these are all fundamental questions that need to be answered before you just throw medicine at symptoms. That obviously doesn't work. Here we are, $4.2 trillion a year plus spending on medicines, and medicine's third leading cause of death. I mean, so how well has that worked out? It's worked out horribly. Anyway. What's the max of DEA? Do you mean DHA? Or DHEA? Because there's different abbreviations there. So ET, if you're asking about DHA, which I think you are because you're also talking about EPA, which these are subtypes of omega-3, there's no known max. Like I wouldn't worry about an overdose. I mean, where most people limit themselves with fish oil is one is either cost, because it's just not practical to take, 8 1-gram capsules a day. You blow through a bottle in 10 days and you'll spend $200 a month in fish oil. You don't need that much. But there's no known really maximum dose for toxicity. It's pretty safe at higher doses. We'll sometimes put people on 8 or 12 grams a day if they have a post-traumatic brain injury or if there's some type of trauma that we're trying to help support. But as a general rule of thumb, 2 grams a day so about a gram of DHA and about a gram of EPA are a pretty good place to start for a lot of folks. So if you're wanting a good place to start, that's what I would recommend. Would L-Serine be helpful if your insomnia is from mold exposure? It can be, but it depends, Kersey, if you're still in the mold, because the reason there's several reasons, but one of the main reasons people in mold develop insomnia has to do with the fight or flight system. They become hypersensitized to molds and mycotoxins and endotoxins in that wet, damage building environment. So their immune system's chronically on high alert, right? It's chronically battling the chemicals emitted by microbes decaying the house. And so the body's in a chronic state of fight or flight. And this is why they're not sleeping, because their cortisol's through the roof and cortisol keeps you awake at night. And so you can take L-Serine and you might get some benefit, but usually what we see, if you're still in the mold, if you're still in the water damage building, you're probably going to get benefit for a few weeks, maybe 2 or 3, even as much as 4 weeks. And then your body is going to override it. And the reason why your body's going to override it is because your body wants you to get out of there. It needs you to leave. It needs you to escape the danger. That's why you're staying awake. Your body's saying run. And if you're suppressing that mechanism, your body will always figure out a way to override it. That's why a lot of people too, not even beyond serine, they take things like GABA or theanine or chamomile or other things, even prescription drugs that, like clonazepam, et cetera, to bypass that fight or flight. And ultimately, a lot of times these drugs quit working. Why? Because body's smarter than what you're taking, and your body's trying to message you. And if you suppress the message and don't deal with it, it will just haunt you indefinitely. So I hope you're out of the mold. But if you're out of the mold and you're just trying to get your sleep cycle back on cue, yeah, serine can be extremely helpful in that regard. So, yep. Naturopath is celiac and suggests I try buckwheat and amaranth. I've been grain-free for 4 years, but can't gain weight. Your suggestion? Eat more food. Buckwheat and amaranth, I don't recommend. I mean, there's a whole section in my book, No Grain, No Pain, about why I don't recommend those ultimately. But you're not going to put on quality weight unless you're eating enough food. And also it depends on the kind of weight you're trying to put on. It also depends on whether or not you're even underweight. There's a lot to unpack with weight, because we live in an obese society. 60% of the US population is overweight. And so the new normal perception of what healthy weight looks like is so skewed. I get this all the time with my own patients. It's, their family members, as they're losing weight. Like I had somebody a couple weeks ago, they lost like 30 pounds in 10 weeks. It's fantastic because they were way overweight, and they still are overweight, but all their family was freaking out. Like, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure this diet is healthy? And here this person, because their perception of what healthy weight looks like is so skewed. They look at obese people and think that's normal. And I don't know if that's your situation, and I'm not saying that's your situation, Diane, but there's healthy weight, then there's the type of weight you're trying to put on, and ultimately have to eat enough total calories. And where a lot of people go on grain-free lack, or where they kind of struggle to hit the right numbers, is with protein. And so make sure that your protein is equivalent to 1/3 of your total calories. Now, one simple exercise that you can do to help kind of accommodate your weight to where you want it to be is you can go online. Anybody can do this. It's very simple. There's something called a BMR calculator. B as in basic, M as in metabolic, R as in rate. So basic metabolic rate calculator. And you can pull these calculators up. Actually, there's a number of different equations that scientists have developed to try to determine what a person's baseline calories needs to be. But if you know what your BMR is, and then you adjust it for the level of exercise that you're currently doing, then you know how many calories per day you should be eating to maintain your current weight. And if your goal is weight gain, then you have to increase that level of calories above that rate so that you can predictably put more on, because your body's not going to gain weight if you're not in a caloric excess. It's going to struggle. And anyway, I hope that's helpful for you. But I don't recommend adding just other pseudo grain calories in just for the sake of gaining weight, right? After allowing time for healing and following No Grain, No Pain, do you suggest reintroducing cashews, lentils, and beans? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. It depends on the person, Grace. So many people do really poorly when they try to reintroduce those foods, and some do okay. And I've seen it all over the map. As a general rule of thumb, I'm not opposed to some lentils and beans. Where I see people get in trouble is in the preparation of those foods. And then the other place we see them get in trouble is they're trying to gravitate to all these bean and lentil pastas and cereals. And there's just more processed food disguised as health food. And I don't recommend that. If you're going to reintroduce them, reintroduce, the actual natural food. But I would recommend that you cook them really thoroughly. Soak them first. Drain the water, because you're going to drain a lot of the anti-nutrients out if you soak them. Minimum 12-hour soaks. But even in some cases longer. I even like to have people sprout their beans before they cook them, because what this does is it removes a lot of the anti-nutrients and other things that cause the digestive distress. And so if you can do that effectively, if you're 6 months and beyond No Grain, No Pain, and you're just trying to get some diversity back into your diet, I think it's worth an attempt, but you just have to be careful about how you do it. It's a good book. I don't agree with everything it says, but nonetheless, it's a good book called Nourishing Traditions, and it has great cooking methodologies for lentils and beans if you want to check that out. I think the author of that is Sally Fallon. She's with the Weston Price Foundation. Does great work. Is organic rice whole in supplements okay when celiac? No, I don't recommend it. They'll call it gluten-free, but by definition, gluten is the name of the family of proteins found in the seeds of grass that are soluble in alcohol. That's the formal definition of gluten. So when we ask, is there a form of gluten in rice? The answer is absolutely yes. The name of that gluten is orzonin. So if you're consuming rice, you're getting a type of gluten called orzonin. There are studies that show orzonin causes inflammatory damage in the GI tract, and this is one of the reasons I don't recommend it. But clinically, just based on my experience working with more than 10,000 people with autoimmunity, rice triggers. Now, some of you might argue, I do it and I'm just fine. Look, I'm not here to make statements that are factually true for everyone, but I'm here to share my experience with you, and I don't recommend rice. And I see a lot of people every week reacting to rice-based supplements. It's one of the most common things we see. They're doing the diet right, but they bring in their bag of pills, and we're analyzing the ingredients. And what do you always find? Rice. You remove that, and they start feeling better. So I just don't recommend rice in products. I think manufacturers that are making, especially if they're trying to make gluten-free products, should know more about what gluten is and quit just trying to be trendy. What brand of shampoo, body soap do you recommend? If none, do you have a recipe to make your own? I recommend you find a product that works for you that's corn and grain-free. There's lots of different brands that would fit that category. Personally, Castile soap, glycerin soap usually fit the bill pretty good if you're just looking for a soap. Shampoos are all over the map. There are a number of different brands that I would encourage you to look at, and you can use EWG.org to just make sure that the brand you're buying is less chemically loaded, but then you can also read the ingredients to make sure it's grain-free. But especially women, they're just different hair types and everything else. That's why I haven't really pushed hard my scientific team to develop those kinds of things. It's just because people are just so different when it comes to skin and hair products. Question about decaffeinated coffee. It's processed coffee. Is that why it's harmful to health, or doesn't it have such a negative effect? Depends on the coffee, depends on whether it's organic, depends on whether it's contaminated with mold or mycotoxins, depends on how it was decaffeinated. Was it a chemical method, or was it a cold pressed method? So, I mean, there's a lot of different variabilities there. And then, if it's decaffeinated, some people are allergic to coffee. We see that quite frequently. There's some research that shows that there is molecular mimicry between coffee and gluten, not with everyone, but so ideally, in that situation, if you suspect coffee is a problem, you can, the simplest thing in the world to do is just remove it for, a few months and see how you feel. And if you feel better, you have an answer. And if you don't feel any difference or change, you probably aren't, coffee's probably not the issue. One of the bigger problems with coffee is that coffee is a delivery system for unhealthy things. So, a lot of people put processed dairy or processed sweeteners or processed creamers in their coffee. And that's where coffee can really become more unhealthy versus just the coffee alone. There's some pretty good data on coffee actually extending life in moderation, key being, I've seen people that drink that, a pot a day, and those people usually are not doing very well. But if you keep it reasonable, a lot of people can tolerate coffee just fine. It's just, again, boils down to the brand, the organic status, the mold status, and what else you're putting in it. When people say eat with the seasons, does that mean what is in season in your state, or does it mean for the entire hemisphere of the US? A little bit of both. I would try to buy locally. I mean, it's best to buy, if you can find a local organic farm and buy locally, that's ideal. And then you can also preserve things. So you can eat in the season, but you can also buy things in bulk during the season and properly can and preserve them so that you have, kind of backup food throughout the fall and winter months. And that's okay too, because you harvest it in season. So it's not just you have to eat with the season exactly or you fail. Where we find that benefit too is that when you don't have to ship products across the country or across the water, You don't have to use anti-ripening sprays and other chemicals to prevent the product from going bad while it's in transit. So it's always best if you can buy local. I support any of you. Buy local in your environment as much as you can. Support those small farms. Support the production of real food, because there are too many nefarious people in this world that are trying to halt our ability to grow our own food and make our own food. And I hope that we don't ever see that day. But it's definitely reality, at least an attempted reality. What causes gut motility problems? Lots of things. Stress, the wrong food, microbial imbalances within your microbiome can cause gut motility problems. Too much caffeine, dehydration. I say dehydration, it could be lack of water, it could also be lack of electrolytes. For some people, fiber. Lack of fiber. For others that don't need quite as much fiber. Not everyone needs, the 25 to 50 grams of fiber that's generically recommended for everyone. Some people do really, really well without fiber. So it just depends on the situation, Joyce. Different people have gut motility problems for different reasons. Gluten is a big trigger for a lot of people because it can cause a gastroparesis through damaging the nerves that feed the gut. Is there blood or other tests for heavy metal toxicity? Yeah, simply. Yeah, pre and post provocation urine is probably one of the best ways to analyze the presence of stored toxic metals, but also the presence of current exposure. Are synthetic made supplements as good as whole food ones? Depends. There's time and place for certain synthetic things. I mean, a classic example there would be vitamin B1 as benfotiamine. It works better than B1. It just does with neuropathy, with persistent nerve damage and diseases like multiple sclerosis. Thiamine hydrochloride derived from a natural plant-based source is not going to be as clinically effective as benfotiamine, which is a water-soluble analog of vitamin B1. It just works better. We don't know why. But it does. And that's just an example. I think there's a lot of people out there that are absolutists. They're like, no technology ever is going to be a good thing. And then there are other people that are like, all the technology, and then there's everything else in between. And I think that's where it's kind of hard to draw a line sometimes and to really be able to make a clear decision for yourself, because there's also lots of opinions, right? And when you talk about experts, there's some expert opinions that are like, no, it's only this one or only that one. And I think part of what makes me unique and what makes my channel unique from a lot of the other channels, and this is not saying anything bad about anyone. I think there's a lot of great educators out there that have great podcasts and YouTube shows. There's a lot of really smart doctors. But I'm a clinician. And so when you have the advantage of both the academic mind, so like I can read and I can understand and interpret the literature. So you have the academic mind. When you combine that with the outcomes of actual patients multiplied over decades, there's an advantage because there's an experience advantage to that. And I think that's where I bring a lot to the table to help educate people, is just through my experience. And that's not to say that my experiences are the only experiences that can be right, but I think it adds a lot of benefit. And so that B1 example is probably the best example I would give you. But I'm not sold that a potential synthetic might not have purpose. A big part of it is just clinically, how does the person respond? How does the person heal or not heal with one versus the other? If I'm just making a generalization and I'm just saying, look, let's just be smart and take a good quality multivitamin, a good quality fish oil, maybe a good quality probiotic, those kinds of things, then I'm going to go with natural over synthetic all day long. But in my products that we sell at Gluten-Free Society, 99% of those are natural, right? But there are certain things that we will use synthetically because they just work better. Can amino acids help a 14-year-old boy with ADHD? Depends. Yes and no. If the 14-year-old has a tyrosine deficiency, then giving that boy tyrosine to make better dopamine and adrenaline and noradrenaline is going to be helpful. So it just depends on the context of whether those amino acids are problematic in driving the symptoms of his ADHD. But yes, a lot of these kids with ADHD, They're 80% carbohydrate in their diet. They're protein malnourished. They're amino acid malnourished. And all of your neurochemicals are derivative of amino acids, which come from protein. So it's a very, very important part of that condition. And you should know that, and ideally get the boy tested. You can do our micronutrient test at Gluten-Free Society. We offer it because there's so many doctors that don't know how to properly do nutritional testing. So we offer it directly to the public, so that they can get data. Would it be helpful to take L-serine, neuroinflammation, and ultraserine for memory, or should you just choose one? I mean, I would just go with one at first. I mean, don't complicate it. Pick one and go with it. But if you're looking at something for the brain or the nervous system specifically, I would gravitate toward phosphatidylserine, which is ultraserine. Just recently diagnosed with mold illness. Can blurry vision and myopia in one eye be related to mycotoxins? Yes. Man, that was one of the ways I got hammered when I was in mold, is my vision. As far as can it be reversed? Yes and no. I've seen it be reversed in people. I can share my own anecdote with you. Like for me, my vision deteriorated really badly. It was quite nerve-wracking when I was in mold, because it happened so quickly, and I had perfect vision before the mold. Today, I've probably recovered, and it's been over 4 years, I've probably recovered 85 maybe percent, 85% of the vision loss that I accrued when I was in it. So even still, it's not back up to speed. And I've done everything that I know to do to improve it. Currently, I'm actually doing red light therapy for my eyes to see if I get a bigger improvement, because the data on red light therapy for improvement in vision is very clear at this point in humans. And I'll be reporting those results and outcomes back to you guys soon enough. Can too much vitamin C cause cataracts? Absolutely not. No, vitamin C is not going to cause cataracts. I'd say, if anything, an absence of vitamin C is going to contribute to cataracts. Are there any studies on serine and migraine? Not really. There's just not enough research on serine. As I mentioned earlier, it's not hard to get funding for big research studies. Have I seen serine be beneficial in migraine? All day long. We get a lot of migraineurs in the practice, and as I mentioned Tuesday, 10 to, I don't know, I don't have the exact numbers, but I venture 10 to 20% of our population of people that come to see me have serine deficiency. It's not an uncommon deficiency. Do you think taking 400 milligrams of phosphatidylserine will help my wife, who had brain surgery to remove a cyst from her fourth ventricle? Maybe it's worth a shot, but it depends. I mean, I don't know enough about your wife, and besides that surgery, are there other health issues? Are there other confounding factors that might influence her? Really, what I would encourage you is Mel, can we post our pre and post surgery protocol? If you're going to do something post surgically to help somebody recover and repair, check out our post surgery protocol. It's designed to help you heal better and recover better. I'm seeing Dr. Driscoll next week. Will you also be involved in helping him? Yeah, I mean, Dr. Driscoll and I talk every week, and he brings cases to me, and we consult together, intrinsically on a weekly basis. So, yes, we're a team. How do we know if we should take a probiotic? Are probiotics recommended for everyone with celiac? I recommend them, Christina, with everyone who's newly diagnosed. So if you just got your diagnosis and you're just now going in that direction with your diet change, yes, I recommend one. Probably a good idea to take it for about 2 to 3 months minimum, and maybe even as long as 6. And the reason why is the data is pretty clear about how gluten disrupts the microbiome, especially certain species of Bifidobacter and Lactobacillus. It's why we developed a product called Biotic Defense, which is designed for gluten-sensitive and celiac individuals. So, but for that, now beyond that, I also recommend you eat your probiotics. And so, fermented foods like sauerkraut or fermented vegetables can be an ally. You can also get good, healthy probiotics by going outside or having pets, animals. A lot of people are germophobic, but you get probiotics from germs, what we call germs, which really are nothing more than little microscopic training lessons for your immune system to be healthier, right? If you want to think of it that way, instead of thinking about, oh, gross, I'm going to get sick, think about how awesome that's going to help train my immune system to do a better job for me. That's really the way you should see microorganisms in the environment, unless the microorganisms are growing so out of control and the toxins they're producing are so great that you create a problem. I saw that serine helps with migraine. Can it help with occipital neuralgia? It can, but I mean, it also depends on why you have occipital neuralgia. Is it because you can have an occipital neuralgia through dysfunctional movement of your cranial bones and of your where your occiput connects to your cervical spine. And so probably a good place to go for that, we get you a good chiropractor and get a good diagnosis around if there's a physical component. But CoQ10, vitamin B2, yes, serine, magnesium and vitamin B12 are all going to be good in that regard. Does castor oil help cataracts? There's no data on that. I've had a lot of anecdote, Deborah, where people have reported back and said that it's been very helpful for them. But there's no data that we could say with a great degree of certainty that, that should be a treatment for cataracts, but it won't hurt. What should you avoid before a 24-hour urine oxalate test? Nothing, because when you're doing it, like if you try to avoid everything oxalate and then you go collect your urine for 24 hours, you might end up with a false negative, and you don't want that. So you just keep eating the way you're eating if you're doing an oxalate test, and should try to discern whether or not your oxalate levels are too high. I bought a bone box because I'm having bone grafts done after tooth removal surgery in a few weeks. Do I start taking it before? Yeah, 1 week before would be ideal. Get those minerals in your circulation a week before and get yourself ready for the trauma of that surgery. If a family member lost their sense of smell post-COVID and it didn't come back and they just told me about it, what nutritional supplements would you recommend? Zinc and quercetin. Zinc, depending on their height, age, etc., about 50 to 125 milligrams a day, combined with anywhere from 3 to 4 grams of quercetin a day. So that if you're looking at Gluten-Free Society products, that would be Ultra Zinc and Ultra Q. What should I ask when taking a bone density test? I don't understand. What do you mean, what should you ask? I think before taking any test, the question needs to be, what is this test going to actually tell us? And the problem with bone density tests is that they're commonly used to diagnose osteoporosis as the only sole discretionary tool of analysis, and that's wrong. Bone density tests only measure X-ray absorption of bone. That does not tell us anything about the quality or the elasticity or the resilience of your bone. It just tells us how well it absorbs X-rays compared to somebody younger than you, typically, because the T-scores that they're reporting on those tests that they hammer people with mostly are 35-year-old female comparative. So, I'm not a big fan of bone density tests, to be honest with you. I would much rather, if I'm trying to assess somebody's bone, you can do so with a bone density test, along with an X-ray, along with what are called bone resorption markers, where you're looking at urinary markers of bone turnover in the urine. An example of one would be deoxypyridinoline, sometimes referred to as pyridinium crosslinks as well. But also, I'd look at vitamins and minerals, because we build bone through vitamins and minerals, and I'd also assess the person's physical activity, weight, in anthropometric data. So I want to know, what is their body fat composition? Do they exercise? Are they doing resistance training? Because those things in combination, those lifestyle habits, those behavioral habits, those nutritional status, are going to have a far greater impact on bone and give me a far greater understanding of a person's bone health than a stupid DEXA scan. They're overrated, and doctors don't really even know the technology or the science behind them. They just do them because it's become a standard of care. And unfortunately, it's the sole reason so many women are put on bone building drugs that actually make their bones more brittle and more at risk for fracture over 5-year periods of time. And those drugs also erode the esophageal lining. They also destroy the mandible. One of the common side effects of being on those drugs for long periods of time is something called osteonecrosis of the jaw. Why would you want to run that risk? Because all they're doing with those drugs is treating your risk of a future fracture. So what about the future risk of destroying my jawbone as a result of being on the medication? Like, let's think about all the risks. I'm sorry, guys, I'm getting heated, but this is what is so important about informed consent. Risk-benefit ratio of medicines is an important conversation. So the big question that you want to have is this bone scan a tool for you to prescribe me this drug? And if so, what are the risks and benefits of being on that drug? And I don't want the dismissive attitude either. I don't want you to say, oh, it's rare that people have side effects. No, pull out the literature, pull out the drug manufacturer's risks and tell me what they are. Educate me, doctor, because if you're not doing it and you're dismissing it, then you're fired. That's the way I would handle it. Because we don't need mediocrity in healthcare. Anytime I eat something on a regular basis, I show IgE allergy to it. Am I really allergic to them? What do you mean you show IgE allergy to it? Did you test and you're measuring IgE in your blood? Or are you just having like an allergic response, Debbie? I'm not sure what your meaning is there. If you're having an allergic response, listen to your body. Your body's trying to tell you something about that food. But if you're actually measuring it on a blood test where it shows you have an allergic response, also avoid it. Now, do an avoidance for 6 months and then maybe come back and try a reintroduction of anything that you don't have an anaphylactic response to. But oftentimes what we see people when they have a high level of food intolerance or allergy, it's because there's something environmentally stimulating their mast cells to overproduce histamine. So they're just overreactive as a whole, and they acquire or develop more and more allergies. And probably one of the most common culprits that cause that, in my experience, is mold exposure in the environment. One of the mold toxins causes your immune system to shift gears into kind of a high histamine mode. So, but if you did a test by blood, then do a 6-month elimination. And that way, when you come back, remember your immune system lives 6 months. So, 6 months later, here it is. Maybe it's less calm, and now maybe it's calm enough where you can reintroduce some foods, provided you've dealt with the triggers. Let's see here. So what's the first part of that top question? Is there a... Oh, so how long to take zinc and quercetin for loss of smell post-COVID? About 3 months, starting with 3 months. If they have poor nutrient absorption from a gastric bypass, then they should be getting their vitamin and mineral status checked every 6 months without fail for the rest of their life. If they don't want to die of nutritional deficit complications, because that's the reality. Bypass surgeries are dangerous, in my opinion. The temporary weight loss that you might achieve from the surgery does not outweigh the massive malnutrition you're going to create for the rest of your life. And I used to go around the country teaching GI clinics about surgery-induced nutritional deficit. They didn't know it. They just didn't know it. And a lot of clinics that I would go to, they would embrace this message, but a lot of them wouldn't. And so I know that's probably still the same. That was 15 years ago. Could my itchy skin condition be caused from post-mold home remediation and current mold detox protocol? Yeah, it's possible. definitely possible. On a paleo diet, having floating stools, what protocol? Well, you got to figure out why you're malabsorbing fat. Either you're eating, Mike, you're either eating too much fat, which sometimes will cause your stools to float, or you're malabsorbing fat that you're eating, which will also cause it. So you have to look at that. Paleo diets can be super, super high fat, and sometimes for some people, especially if you've got a history of gluten issues and you've got historical like damage to the intestinal lining or damage to the pancreas where you don't produce the fat enzymes as well, then lower fat or higher fat in the diet might strain your capacity to a certain extent. So a lot of variability in what, as far as the protocol is concerned. You could start with a good digestive enzyme that has some lipase in it. If you want to check out Ultra Digest, that would be a good place to start, see if that improves it. You might also try Lipogest, which helps to bind that fat, as a place to start. That's what I would suggest, but ultimately you want to know why. Is low ferritin most typically a gut issue? It can be, but typical or not? I mean, low ferritin, so let's define what you mean by a gut issue. Like, a gut issue always has a trigger or a cause, and that can be many different things. You could have a gut issue because you're taking a medicine that destroys, the mucosal barrier of your gut, causing iron loss. You could have a bacteria that's producing endotoxins in your gut, causing damage and blood loss, and occult blood loss, leading to low ferritin. You could be a woman that has a monthly cycle, and so your ferritin is low because you're losing blood once a month and you don't eat enough iron in the food that you're consuming. I mean, so it just depends. And those things should be ruled out. But if you consistently have low ferritin, I can tell you this: the number one nutritional deficiency in people with gluten sensitivity is iron. And low ferritin is a sign of low iron. And so that would be something I would encourage you to look into, is if you're not already on a gluten-free, grain-free, no grain, no pain diet, get clarity around whether or not that's something you need to do. Recently at a derm appointment, told that any sun is bad. Fire dermatologists and move on. That would be my advice. What an idiot. I was thinking about so-called thinning out of one's blood. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Is there a vitamin B1 protocol that you recommend for treating tremors and Parkinson's? I mean, depends on the person. There's not like a singular protocol because it's a multifactorial disease. Parkinson's, it isn't just about B1. It could be about other B vitamins. It could be about environmental toxins or exposures. It could be about a lot of things, Christina. So, but as a general rule of thumb, benfotiamine, 300 milligrams a day, couple that with 400 milligrams of magnesium a day as well. If you're just looking at getting more B1 into a person to support them. High ESR, high MCV, high TSH, while simultaneously being in low inflammation and high repair mode. Low CRP, strong healing. I don't know what you mean by low. Well, I know what you mean by low CRP, but how do you know you're strong healing other than it's just a subjective outcome that you're experiencing? But I mean, if you have a high ESR, you're inflamed. I don't care what your CRP is. If your ESR is high, you are inflamed. If your MCV is high, you're anemic, which is most likely going to be due to B12 or folate deficiency. And if you're high TSH, there's a lot of reasons why that could be. If you're supplementing with iodine or biotin, you could have an artificially elevated TSH, but you could also have a thyroid problem. But I would argue that profile that you wrote down is not low inflammation, high repair, because high ESR is not high repair. High ESR is inflammatory. Okay. Hard to find supplements without, no, it isn't. It's not hard to find supplements without rice. Go to glutenfreesociety.org right now and look at the over 100 supplementals that we have there. All of them are rice-free. I went carnivore to help my hormones after coming off birth control. Do you recommend that diet Long term, no, not long term. Short term is relatively safe. There's no great data showing it is problematic. There's no great long term data on it at all, which is one reason why I wouldn't recommend it. The long term data I have seen on people on long term 5+ year carnivore is widespread malnutrition, like a lot of nutritional deficiencies in these individuals. So that's where I get concerned with somebody long-term carnivore. But if you found it helpful and you've done it, I would try to start reintroducing it. Start with fruit, and then after you've introduced several options around fruit, I'd start reintroducing some vegetables as well. Is it true that not good take T3 when we eat T4? You mean don't take your T3 and your T4 together if they're both medicines? I don't know. That's not necessarily a problem. But always take your medicine as your doctor prescribes it. I'm very unhealthy, Hashimoto's, adrenal fatigue, gut's a mess. I don't know if I should do surgery in a few weeks for my infected root canal. I mean, you know, part of what triggers autoimmunity, Laura, is infection. So if you got 2 infected root canals, that may be part of what's driving your unhealthiness. So the conundrum, you know, you have to make that decision, but the conundrum is if infection drives autoimmunity and you never deal with it, how are you going to get past the autoimmunity? So but I would, you know, talk to your doctor there about those things, and, you know, feel more comfortable about making the best decision that you can. When do you plan to get your food allergy test back in stock? Soon, maybe the next month or two. I'm actually having a meeting about it. I think tomorrow. It's on my schedule. What do you recommend for natural electrolytes? A good sea salt, a good table salt, rock salt are going to provide good electrolytes. Eating whole foods that provide natural salts because they're just naturally available in the food is also a good source of electrolytes. But ultimately, salt is probably, if we're talking just the best natural way to do it, I'd recommend salting your food, not being scared of salt, which is where a lot of people are. Now, you can use a lot of the electrolyte products on the market too, but and some of them are fine, but a lot of them contain, you know, the artificial sweeteners and a bunch of the other dyes and other garbage, and so you have to be careful about the product that you choose. If you're negative with celiac, with a negative biopsy, but have autoimmune disease, even the one should avoid gluten. So it looks like, Jamil, you didn't have proper genetic testing for non-celiac gluten sensitivity. You can be negative for celiac, but still be gluten sensitive. And if you had a DQ2, that's a celiac marker. But did they also measure you for DQ1 or DQ3? Because those are non-celiac gluten sensitivity markers that you may also have. And so if you haven't had that type of genetic testing done, I'd highly encourage you to get it done. You can do that through glutenfreesociety.org. We offer that test. But this is just my experience. I've never seen a case in my decades-long career where somebody had autoimmune disease and wasn't gluten sensitive. I just haven't seen it. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It's just my experience. Should we take vitamins every day or every other day or twice a week? You should take them as you need them. And the best way to know that is to test. But I'm of the opinion you should take a multivitamin. We have a really good quality one called Ultra Nutrients. I mean, if you're going to take nothing else, take that. 2 caps twice a day for an adult, every day. I call it food insurance, because a good multivitamin provides you with the kind of the gap of modern food, unless you're on your own farm doing your own regenerative agriculture, you know, making your own soil, you know, playing around with your own microorganisms to enhance your soil and stuff. Your food nutrient density is going to suffer. It's not going to be fantastic. There's research coming out now that shows that food from 30 years ago is like 40%, 50% less nutrient dense than the food today. And it's part of because the soil's not properly cared for. We have mass growing of foods to feed so many people. And so there's gonna be a risk of nutritional deficiency with modern farming practices. How safe is DEET as an insecticide? I don't like it. I don't want to use it. However, if you live in a major area where there's a tremendous amount of mosquitoes, the city's probably going to apply it on a regular basis. And I would argue that from a public health perspective, there's probably some benefit to that because mosquitoes can carry a lot of nasty things. This is another one of those examples where sometimes the technology can be a good public health policy as a whole if it's not overused, but there's also a detriment, right? There's two sides to the coin. Is DEET good for the environment? Absolutely not. But people getting malaria in an epidemic fashion because mosquitoes aren't being properly controlled where they're living in a city, that could be just as detrimentally a problem, at least for the people. So one of my favorite insect repellents is actually, I like vanilla. If you're talking about gnats, if you're talking about no-see-ums, vanilla, just vanilla works beautifully well. You can mix it with water, put it in a spray bottle and squirt it on. And that's what I do when I go down in the spring where I live. I'm on a farm and that's what we use as a natural repellent. But there are other great natural repellents. Lemon balm is great. Citronella is great. And you can take the oils of that. You can make your own mix, or you can buy some of the brands that do that for you. But citronella and lemon balm are probably two of the most effective natural mosquito repellents that you can spray on the skin in preparation for being exposed. What would you suggest to help heal IgA nephropathy? You got to go gluten-free, Anna. IgA nephropathy is a secondary consequence of gluten reaction. So if your friend is trying to figure out an answer, the mainstream care of that, I mean, there's no long-term solution, and it's all management. If you want to really have an impact on it, you got to go grain-free. Give your friend a copy of No Grain, No Pain, and if they're willing to change their diet, the outcome will speak for itself, but I've seen many cases of people with IgA nephropathy improve with diet change. Can dry macular degeneration be caused from mold exposure? I don't think we have any research that shows that specifically. Macular degeneration as a whole, though, is it's damage. It's inflammatory damage. And so theoretically anything that can cause inflammatory damage to the eye could contribute to that. I mean, it's a multifactorial component, but could mold? Potentially, very much so. My cat developed inoperable bladder cancer after a year in a newly built home and started losing his hair. Check for mold. Newly built homes don't protect you from mold. As a matter, I would argue that newly built homes are probably more mold problematic. Is a white blood thiamine test the same as a cellular test? No. I mean, it's what they're looking at is it is sort of, but no. So what they're measuring, if you have like a white blood cell thiamine test, it's measuring quantitatively an amount of thiamine inside your white blood cells as compared to other people. If you're doing our cellular testing, it's an outcomes test. We're not measuring an amount. It's not hey, you have X amount inside your cells. It's an outcomes test. What we do is we take your cells and their white blood cells, they're lymphocytes. The reason we use lymphocytes is the research of Dr. Shively at UT, University of Texas, over 20 years found that lymphocytes represent metabolically every tissue in the body better than any other one tissue sample we could use. And so we use that lymphocyte, and then we measure its growth rate, and then after we've evaluated the growth rate of your cells, we then give your cell one vitamin or one nutrient at a time, and we measure the growth rate again, and we compare your baseline growth rate to your new growth rate when we gave it the nutrient. So it's an outcome, right? Did the cell perform better? So if you've ever seen our INA test, you'll always notice there's a percentage to the right. That percentage is the improvement of growth rate or outcome of your cell functionality when we gave it more of that nutrient. And in my opinion, that's a far more accurate way to understand whether or not a supplement is going to be helpful for you, because we're talking about improvements in cell function versus measuring a specific quantity in your cell as compared to the quantity in other people's cells. Fundamentally, the problem with all labs that use standard deviation bell curves, reference range from A to B, right, is the definition of what normal is, because that definition keeps changing. The needle or the goalpost keeps moving. The fatter America gets, the sicker America gets, the reference ranges get wider. And so what happens is you end up with a reference range that normalizes illness. And that's why I don't like a lot of the testing that's out there, especially with nutrition, where it's a, high end, low end. And a lot of people try to say, well, we're gonna narrow those reference ranges and we're gonna create functional reference ranges. It's not functional. You're not creating a functional reference range just because you say we want to narrow it. A functional range is something that shows a functional improvement, which is what we measure. We measure the actual outcome of functional improvement. We don't narrow the range and call that a functional range. And a lot of people are being duped online. There's, one of the companies, I think it's, I don't want to say anything bad about anybody, but it's called Functional Health. And a lot of people are just spending a lot of their money getting basic blood work and having it interpreted with functional ranges. And it's just junk. It's just, it's not helpful, and you're wasting your money. That's my opinion on it. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. Ferritin is 70 too low. If you're a menstruating female, it's kind of right on the line. But no, I mean, it's you're okay. Where you really, as a menstruating female, if your ferritin is starting to get below 70, you should start picking up more iron in your diet. Not necessarily iron supplementation. Now, if your ferritin's dropping below 25 and you're really tired around your cycle and on the floor and short of breath and fatigued and your muscles ache, you might now, at that point, you might want to start looking at iron as a supplement. Just found out I have zearalenone toxicity. Anything specific for that? So Zea is it's a fusarium-based mycotoxin. You got to figure out where it's coming from. I mean, that's how you get specific, is where is it? Where are you getting source from? If that's growing in your home, if it's growing in eating your walls and making food out of your house, you're not gonna detox it away if you're being exposed to it. So you got to figure out where it's coming from, remove it, remove the source of the moisture that's allowing it to grow. And some people eat zearalenone. I mean, if you're eating a high grain-based diet, you're going to get exposure to Zea. There've been studies on that. If you're eating ultra-processed foods, you're going to get exposure to Zea. So you've got to look at your diet as a potential source for it as well. About to move into a new place, a shed or a tiny home, so scared of cross-contamination. I understand almost thing from old place. Tell me where people make mistakes. So you're talking about moving from one moldy home to a clean home. What are the mistakes people make? They bring mattresses, they bring pillows, they bring heavy fabric items that they didn't properly remediate. They bring newspapers or a lot of books or paper that has the potential to harbor mold and mycotoxins. If it's anything that you're bringing over from an old place to a new place, if it's super porous and hasn't been HEPA vacuumed and properly cleaned, that's a mistake, in my opinion, especially if you're ultra hypersensitized to it. Because when people are in mold and sick, their immune systems become so hypersensitized to exposure that even small exposures can become triggers. And so that's why in many cases, some people just leave everything behind. I know when we were in mold, the only thing we took out of that house were the clothes on our back. And then, it was one of the first things that we did. We went to a hotel for 2 months to recover. But then we went to Walmart and bought a bunch of cheap clothes to try to survive it. And I was lucky in that I am in my office, in my practice, I have a little closet. So I had a lot of my clothes for work and hanging up here in my office. And so I was able at least to preserve some of my clothing. But I mean, we lost, imagine 20 years of clothes.
that's what you lose when you lose a home. You just, so you just got to be careful, Barbara, about what you decide to bring. Is it worth your health? And that can be a tough question to answer, but that's where most people make the mistakes, is they bring things that are super porous or super hard to remediate into their new environments. I had a really severe reaction to vitamin B3. My body began to burn from head to toe. That's called a niacin flush, Madeline, and it's not a bad reaction to the vitamin. It's an appropriate reaction. And what I mean by that is when you take niacin at a higher dose, usually like 100 milligrams or more, it vasodilates your blood vessels in your skin. So the peripheral blood vessels will dilate. That's one of the effects of niacin. And what it does, and the way it works is it starts here in the tip of your head, and it just kind of moves through your body, moves through your chest, moves down through your hips and through your legs, and then it goes out your feet, right? So it just kind of moves through you, and it takes about 45 minutes, but it is not an allergic reaction, and it is not a side effect of detriment. It's just vasodilation, and your face probably looked really blotchy and super red, and people around you may have been saying, "Are you okay? Are you having an allergic reaction?" But the reality is it's called a niacin flush, and if you look that up, you can learn more about it. But it's not a detrimental effect. It's just an uncomfortable effect. And one of the things that happens if you need to take niacin and you want to stay on it, you have a couple of other options. One, we have a product called Aging Gracefully, which is a form of niacin that won't cause a flush. We also have, you can find something called niacinamide, which is a non-flushing form of vitamin B3 or niacin. So you can take that and it won't flush you. But I just want to be clear that it's not a bad reaction. I mean, it's bad in terms of your subjective experience, and I understand that. But that's one of the normal side effects of niacin. Can you use a sauna if you have varicose veins? And yeah, there's no contraindication to sauning with varicose veins. What would you recommend for muscle loss from mold? I cleared mold, but having severe muscle loss. Make sure two things. Make sure you're eating a ton of protein. I mean, about a gram per pound to recover your muscle mass. And make sure, if you're capable, make sure you're exercising. The other thing is creatine monohydrate. Just get a pure free-form creatine. We have one at Gluten-Free Society. And 5 grams a day, 1 gram of protein per body weight. Make sure you're exercising to tolerance. Sometimes coming out of mold, that's tricky. I know for me, it took a couple of years to recover physically from the muscle mass that I lost and the visceral fat that I had gained. Actually, if you go back and watch some of my videos from a few years ago, you could see the difference physically and how I looked when I was in mold. The Fusarium is likely coming from malfunctioning HVAC units. Possibly. I mean, I wouldn't say most likely. I would say it's definitely a possibility, though. Anyone else have audio only? Did we go down? Let's see, I think I answered that. How can I keep and build muscle in my senior years? Same advice, Stephen, that I gave a moment ago, is eat enough protein. People get older, they eat less. And then they have sarcopenia as a result of not maintaining their protein status. So you've got to push your muscle, and you don't have to kill yourself, but you need to push your muscle or challenge it on a regular basis. And so I don't know how old you are, but I would look at calisthenics, body weight activity as a starting place with enough protein, and to build, putting creatine in there. And you can do other things, like you can reduce muscle soreness by taking extra L-glutamine. You can improve your recovery time between workouts by taking branched chain amino acids. Those are also can be very helpful. You don't need to be keto. You just need to make sure that your carb fat protein ratios are balanced. Third is a good place to think about being. A third carbs, a third fat, a third protein, which for most people will get them enough protein. But a lot of people, even on gluten-free diets, it's like their carbohydrate levels like 70% of their total calorie intake. And it's carbohydrate toxicity that's hurting them at that point. Is there a link between rosacea and celiac? I have seen it, yes. We have a whole show on celiac, gluten sensitivity, skin disorders that you might want to check out, Casey. Barbara, you're writing questions, but I can't understand the way. I don't know if you're getting a typo or an auto speller or something, but I can't make your questions out really good. So I'm not understanding your meaning. After the INA results, a few minerals are borderline. Would you suggest your Ultra Minerals product instead of taking all separately? Depends, Mary, on which minerals, because Ultra Minerals has many minerals, but doesn't have them all. Like, for example, Ultra Minerals does not contain boron. It does not contain copper for the copper sensitive. So if those are two of your mineral deficiencies, Ultra Minerals won't help with that. Had a bowel reconstruction in 2011, sepsis after 106 pounds. What to absorb? So you need to get, Vicky, you need to get testing done. If you're struggling and you're 106 and you're not putting on weight and you had a reconstruction, you got to make sure you're not malnourished, because you're not going to put weight on if you're malabsorbing. So you need to work with a good functional person to get your gut and your nutrition assessed to understand better what your needs specifically are going to be. What are the best foods to get carbs from? There's not a best food, but I mean, fruit is probably one of the best sources of carbohydrate. Root vegetables can be a good source of carbohydrate. Regular vegetables can be a good source of carbohydrate, depending on what your body tolerates and, can handle. But there's not like a best. I think people a lot of times look for a best food or a superfood. Every food is super if it's super for you. But some foods aren't super for you because your body reacts to them. So one man's food is another's poison. Food source to help with boron: nuts, vegetables, meats. Depends. Boron's largely going to be in your food based on the soil where your food was grown or where it ate. And so that is highly variable. But the highest soil concentration of boron in the world, as far as I know, is Turkey. The lowest is the Caribbean. So if you're importing stuff or if you're in the Caribbean, it's likely that you have a boron deficiency. If you're eating locally, it could be pretty strong. If you're in Turkey, the likelihood's pretty low. Everywhere else is kind of a mixed bag. Okay. Yeah, we're over time again. Look, I want to say thank you for tuning in to Pick Dr. Osborne's Brain. If you found this helpful, come back next week. We're here every Thursday for live Q&A at 12:30 Central Standard Time. So don't miss if you're getting value. If you want to take advantage of our Serine sale today, you can use promo code, Serine15. And that's for either L-Serine or Ultra Serine. And if you just want to support Gluten-Free Society and you want to support my mission of saving 100 million lives, we appreciate you patroning our website, glutenfreesociety.org. If there's anything there, you can peruse our over 100 products for supplements. You can also look at our labs there and see if those are right for you. But we appreciate your business and your support in that way. It's what keeps the lights on for us and allows us to keep sponsors out so that you don't get paid information that's biased and no good. So appreciate you. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you on Tuesday for another episode of Dr. Osborne's Zone. Have a great weekend.